We all recognize the need for substantially scaling up the current level of international climate financing for investments in mitigation and adaptation. Regrettably, the climate financing committed and available so far remains severely insufficient. In this, further complicated by the absence of an internationally agreed definition of climate financing and its accounting methods. I had my first realization about the resource constraint for climate action at COP15 in Copenhagen 2009. I was in the core committee. I was part of a closed-door meeting of leaders to find a last-minute solution. While looking around the table, it struck me that international climate finance would be quite difficult to come by. After going back home, I took the initiative to set up the Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund to undertake homegrown adaptation projects. Bangladesh is now considered a living laboratory of locally led climate adaptation. So far, we have implemented nearly 800 projects at a cost of US $480 million, and all from our own resources. This is, however, still inadequate compared to the US $7 to 8 billion that we require every year to implement our national adaptation plan. To put things in perspective, the current financing need for mitigation as per all the nationally determined contributions, NDC, is estimated at nearly US$6 trillion up to 2030. For adaptation, it is US$215 to 387 billion per annum until 2030. It is obvious that the widening financing gap is further aggravating the global climate crisis. But we cannot simply afford to allow the global temperature to rise above 1.5 Celsius as agreed at COP28 in Dubai. We cannot go back on our commitment to move towards the net zero future at differentiated timeline for developed and developing countries. We must find solution to unlocking climate financing to keep us on track by delivering on the following 6 suggestions. First, developed countries must live up to their commitment of US$100 billion per annum in the 2 years up to 2025, based on a delivery plan. And by the end of this year, we must all agree on a new climate financing target post 2025, preferably above US$100 billion on the basis of scientific evidence. Second, the world needs to get rid of wars and conflicts, illegal occupations, and mindless killings of unarmed civilians, especially women and children, as we watch in Gaza and elsewhere. The impacts of sanctions and counter-sanctions are felt far away from the scene of the conflicts. Senseless arms race must be stopped, and resources need to be diverted instead of mobilizing the much-needed fund for fighting climate change. Let's keep in mind, when the existence of humanity is at stake, pursuing narrow interest would come to nothing. Third, the acute imbalance in financing for mitigation and adaptation needs to be addressed by the least doubling the current level of adaptation financing. In this context, I again thank President Macron for committing to provide €1 billion to Bangladesh for supporting adaptation. Fourth, the long pending issue of streamlining access to existing international climate funds by developing countries must be resolved, including by investing in their capacity. In case of Bangladesh, we only have 2 eligible entities to get financing from the Green Climate Fund, with 2 more in the process.
Okay.
Fifth, the reforms of the global financing architecture must show meaningful results, especially in managing the debt burden of climate vulnerable countries by expanding their access to grant and occasional loans. And finally, government needs to invest in the right plans, policies, and instruments to mobilize private capital flows for climate action. In parallel, international financing institutions need to develop innovative blended financing mechanism to attain private capital for bankable projects. It is evident that the large climate financing gap cannot be addressed without effective private sector participation. The loss and damage, the decision have taken, but it is my experience that time and again we are taking many decisions.
Right.
But the main thing is how much it is implementing, or the developed country, how much they are contributing or coming forward. I want to see that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. I was going to say I was there in Copenhagen, and I remember very much those decisions, and we were quite hopeful. But you mentioned something quite important about spending your own money to deal with the repercussions of climate shocks. And as a member of the V20, I know that the V20 does a lot of advocacy work on behalf of all of their V20 members, and Barbados will be taking over the presidency of the V20. Prime Minister Mia Mottley has been a very staunch advocate of the global financial architecture reform, and she co-hosted the Paris Summit, in short, and has been leading this Bridgetown agenda that brings together this nexus of debt sustainability, of climate action and development. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and the evolution of the Bridgetown agenda?
Well,